Hey, this is Al McGee with YETicket.com. Hey, I am so honored to be talking to this director of the film that he put together. Was a great film that I really enjoyed called The Neutral Ground. And I got CJ Hunt in the house. CJ, how you doing?
In the house. I'm good, Al. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed this documentary, and I recommend to all my viewers to watch this documentary when you have a chance to watch it. It's very informative, and man, it it showed me things that I was not aware of. For
Mm.
example, to get into the documentary a little bit. Well, I'll set it up a little bit. You went to New Orleans around 2015, and
I
you
went
saw
to
that.
I was actually living. I didn't have to go anywhere. I was living there. I actually lived in New
Okay.
Orleans for about 9 years, and so I was there as this was unfolding.
Yeah, and what he's talking about is the city council voted to, dethrone or to tear down the Confederate statues that they had there. Now, I've only been in New Orleans twice, but I never paid attention to those statues or the street names of the Confederate people. Why
Mm.
is that?
So did you know that they were there and just didn't
Nope,
focus on them? You didn't see
didn't
them
focus
at
on them.
all?
I don't remember. See, when I went to New Orleans, I only stayed around Bill Street or whatever. They got the
Hmm.
restaurants and things like that, and the hotel. Because
Hmm.
I went there for business twice,
Yeah.
and so I had to stay around the hotel. But at night, I went to eat. I went to my hotel, and then one day I walked over. They got some beignets at that place. They sell all the great beignets, but that was it.
Yeah,
No, not at all.
the beignets are great, and the statues offer a different type of whiteness in the powder of those beignets. They offer the statues are the statues I do think it is possible for for some visitors to miss them if you're just around Bourbon Street, but
Yeah, that's
Robert
where
E.
I was at.
Lee, from uh 1894 to from 18 Robert E. Lee from 1884 to 2017 was the highest statue in New Orleans. And I think that that is one of the first things that I saw moving there. He had his own circle, Lee Circle. And one of the first things I saw moving there, and you saw my dad, he's in the film. I was like, Dad, they've got a
Hmm.
giant statue to Robert E. Lee. Like this, the pedestal is 60 feet tall. I'm like, Dad, they got a giant statue to Robert E. Lee here. And they've got streets named after Jefferson Davis. So I think some visitors may miss it, but folks who live there and move there, it is this thing that is very obvious, and a thing that you are like, I don't know if this is ever going to change. It is so everywhere.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't realize that, but it's the
I'm happy
South.
for you that you didn't that you
I
didn't
didn't
see
pay
it.
attention to it, but again, I wasn't looking for it, didn't know it existed at that time. Really, even in 2015, 16, I didn't know
Yeah.
until now, and maybe 2019 when everything started to come together. Now, what made you feel that you needed to report on this or do a documentary on it to make people more knowledgeable? Because, in my opinion, this documentary will make people more knowledgeable if some people already knew about it. But if you didn't know about it, oh my goodness, this will open up your eyes.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to do with the documentary. I'm trying to bring the receipts. I want the film to feel like a package of receipts of how deeply America has invested in white supremacy, that the next time you are in a conversation with somebody who says the Civil War wasn't about slavery, or these statues have nothing to do with white supremacy, or most of the soldiers didn't own slaves, that you can turn to the film and have a ready set of responses that actually can push the conversation forward.
Yeah.
That, like, if you're a student and your teacher, if you're a student and you're living in a place where your teacher wants to teach you that it's about states' rights, or you are in a city like Asheville or like Charlottesville still, and so many places in North Carolina and Georgia where these monuments still stand, and your
Mhm.
city leaders are lacking the sort of historical understanding to understand what those monuments are about, I want this film to help feel like it can fill that gap of information.
It really feels a lot of information for me because one, I wasn't aware and I wouldn't know what questions to ask about it anyway. But let's talk about something else that's in New Orleans. This White League of New Orleans. Again, didn't know.
I know, you
Didn't
hear it, you think
know.
it's a soccer team. Way worse than a soccer team.
Oh yeah, because in as you taught me in 1874, they tried to overthrow the interracial government there in New Orleans,
Yeah,
and but what did they do? They got a statue.
they got a statue, man. Yeah, I mean that is. I feel lucky and unlucky that this film, most of it takes you through the Trump era. It's a snapshot of the Trump era.
Hmm.
And I think, the parallels are really obvious to us that, yes, it is insane to hear about a group that was so intent on being white supremacists. They called themselves the White League, that they are a league of white people out to show, black people that they have no place in government. So, yes, it's insane that that group existed, that they had some of the most distinguished members of the society in it, and that they successfully attacked the state government and shot cops in the streets in New Orleans, and they held the city for 3 days and they got a monument. And when you look at how crazy that is that any crazier than a similar sized group of white men attacking the capital of the United States and getting to go through the capital, and many of whom are going to escape punishment? And that those are the
Many of
types of
them.
things that I want audiences to be thinking about, that the past is not past. We are reliving this
That's
every
right.
day because we are
Hmm.
refusing to admit that these things happen.
And also, again, you open my eyes for some more information about, for example, what Robert E. Lee said about the African slave. He said that the blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa as a slave. Quote Robert E. Lee. And one more quote by Jefferson Davis, that African slavery coexists in the United States is a moral, a a social, and a political blessing.
Yes.
And many
Yeah,
people feel
I'm
that.
only laughing not because those things are funny, but because they're so Googleable.
Oh yeah.
It is not Raoul Peck, the director of Exterminate All the Brutes, which is an incredible
Oh yeah. I
documentary
saw
on.
every 4 episodes.
Ooh, yeah. After this, we'll
Oh,
go in on Brutes. But he
oh.
says it's not information that we lack. When it comes to the Confederacy, it is not information that we lack. It is not difficult to Google Robert E. Lee quotes or to Google, secession documents. If in fact you live in a place where you believe that the Confederacy was right, why in school did you never hear about any of the founding documents of the Confederacy? We have to study the Magna Carta, but we never study the founding documents of the one government that broke off from the United States. That
Hmm.
seems strange. And so this film is attempting to sort of dig into that place of, can we talk about these things that we don't normally talk about?
Yeah, and one thing I like, again, you went to Richmond, Virginia, to find all this paperwork and why they succeeded, or why they wanted to succeed from the Union, and because you interviewed a few people, mostly white people, about the Confederacy, and to them, no, it was about state rights and things like that, and they don't even know their own history.
Yeah. I mean, and that's on purpose. And it's one thing. I grew up in the North, and I grew up in Boston and New York. And so for me, the story was absolutely, this was about slavery. And, I think I had an understanding that there's a different story told in some Southern states. But what I hope the contribution of the film is not just to be like, hey, we're all telling a different story and who knows who's right, but that the film documents how that story came to be. It's kind of a true crime of, how this set of ideas was written and put into textbooks and literally written in stone in monuments that stand for 100 years.
Hmm. Now, there was a young lady that you met and you talked to. She was she was working for the American Civil War Museum.
Yeah,
Met
Christy
the
Coleman.
CEO, Christy. Oh my goodness,
Incredible, right?
what a very incredible and very intelligent young lady. How impressed were you about her? And also, when you were talking to her, how did you feel? Oh, I wish I could sit down and just take her out to dinner and talk all night.
I love this question. I hope every interview I talk to asks me the question, how impressed were you with Christy Coleman? Because the answer is very impressed. But also not surprised that she's one of these folks who, very early, has been in this space for so long, and a Black head of a Civil War museum that has absorbed the Museum of the Confederacy. The Museum of the Confederacy no longer exists. It was absorbed by the American Civil War Museum, and then repurposed all of those flags and pistols and photos that didn't have any context or had a false or incomplete story attached to them. And for her to repurpose that in a museum and lead a museum that is saying, hey, let's look at all sides of this story, she's absolutely an incredible individual. And I think a benefit to the film is that you can tell that she is able to jump different perspectives on this film. That, when she's talking about how much the South lost and how bad the Confederacy was beaten and how traumatized these Confederate widows are, I think a lot of viewers are like, why are you telling me about this? You're a Black woman. Why are we having sympathy for these, white Confederate widows in the 1860s? And I think for her, she has a level of nuance about being like, look, you can't understand what they went on to do without understanding how traumatized they were. We know from our personal relationships, trauma is a beast. Trauma will drive you to do crazy things. And, if I was traumatized, who knows the type of life that I would build.
Yeah, exactly. And also she gave you all that history to help you understand the outcome, like the DAR, that organization, and also the daughter of the
United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah, exactly. And other things. But here's one white guy you interviewed, and he wanted to blame Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's cabin for the breakup of the Union. Can you believe it? When I heard that, I said, what?
It's a deep cut. That's a deep cut for someone to be like, look, let me go in on Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. That is a deep cut. But
man.
For everyone, it's some different reference. But the thing that was surprising is how many of those references all come back to the central argument that slavery wasn't that bad. And that how dare Harriet Beecher Stowe make a book that made slavery seem bad. And I think that is the central, that's where the lie starts to show itself. It is strange that folks who defend the Confederacy want to both say this was not about slavery, but also on an unrelated note, slavery is not that bad. That seems fishy.
Yeah, and then you interviewed another woman. She said, well, only 20% of the slave owners were brutal, but the other 80% were very good to the slaves. And then I think you quoted, you said, well, could they pack up, and if they wanted to go visit Detroit or some different city, could they go?
Yeah, no. That's like if I told you that my marriage ended, not because I was cheating. It didn't. My marriage didn't end because I was cheating. But on the other hand, cheating is not that bad. If I started talking about that, you'd be like, it sounds like it ended because of cheating. It's like, no, it had nothing to do with cheating. But really, what is cheating? A lot of cheating is pretty kind and pretty good. It'd be like, why are you trying to argue both of these things? You don't realize how guilty that makes you sound.
Yeah.
If you want to say that it had nothing to do with slavery, okay. So now can we talk about how brutal slavery is? No. Slavery is not that brutal. Okay, well then, I don't know where to go with you.
Oh, wow. Well, let's talk about you for a few minutes. I like that you really told us about you and who you came from and where you came from, and also some of your experiences when you were a young kid growing up. For example, you was talking to your father, Mr. Hunt, and he told you, well, at one time you didn't want to be Black. Talk about that.
I love your questions. I love your questions, Al. Your dad told you didn't want to be Black. Talk about that. His exact words were, you didn't know that you were Black. And that's because I had a Black father who's in the film, and a Filipino mother who died when I was 6. And, they separated when I was young. So I grew up mostly in a Filipino household, also around some white folks in Boston. So didn't fully understand myself to be Black. And I think, some biracial folks out there listening to you may have had that experience of when you grow up not around the Black parent, not around Black family, and around a world that is mostly white, it is hard to conceptualize yourself as being the same thing that your dad is. And I think he was naming that, and I think that sort of search for identity, and sort of swirling thoughts around Blackness is definitely part of the spine of the film.
Well, I really enjoyed your father because over the years, he really tried to make you knowledgeable about yourself and also have self-awareness about you, about who you really are, and also where you came from. I mean, he's a very knowledgeable man, and he really told you the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think making this film and interviewing my father was it was kind of the first time that I realized the pressures on a Black man to teach their child that they are Black and what it means to be Black in America. That's pressure, especially for a generation of folks who may have grabbed onto upward mobility and moved to more white suburbs like my parents did. It's like I watched him in telling me about growing up. I'm like, oh, there's a real fear there that you might not tell your kid the things that they need to understand to, one, stay alive, and two, to understand themselves as a Black person in America. And so with my dad, it was just kind of horror stories from history about slavery and lynching and spectacle lynching and the tearing down of Reconstruction and the KKK. And I think that when you grow up with those ideas as the core of your identity and understanding of who you are, you end up with a film like this that you hear people saying that stuff doesn't exist, and it makes you angry enough to go make a film. And then somewhere in the middle of the film, you're like, damn, so the center of my Blackness is just these horror stories about what white people have done to us. Like, I gotta get a different idea of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and my parents are from Mississippi and Alabama. They never talked about it at all. They never told me, sit down, let me talk to you. You're Black. Let me tell you how the world is or what's
They
going
never
on.
said that?
Nope. And, but I grew up during the civil rights era too,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King. And I saw that part, but on television.
Yeah.
Not in my neighborhood and things like that, and we moved from the projects to a house, but they never sat down and told me any of those things. And just like your parents, my parents divorced too when I was young and things like that.
Yeah,
But
my people are from Jackson, Mississippi. So my dad had
that's
the
where
same.
my mother's from, Jackson,
Oh
Mississippi. We might
wow!
be related.
Hey, what's up, cuz?
Yeah, right.
But yeah. My dad said the same thing. My dad said, his dad never talked to him about this stuff, and he grew up in the air. My grandfather was in the Air Force, so my dad, not only didn't have this convo with his dad, but was going to Europe and was all around. So, had a different idea of himself as well. And someone I think it was his grandma had to set him straight, being like, hey, if you're going to come down and visit us in Mississippi, then you have to understand how the world works. And I think he had a similar kind of conversation with me as well.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Being a parent, it's like, you just got to make sure your kid understands how the world works, and the things that Black parents have to tell their children are very different than what other folks have to tell their children.
Well, my daughter's 36 years old now, and I try to tell her, she's a little bit like me, let me find out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's how she is, really. But I tell her things. She said, what? They were really like that? What? And she's been going to mixed schools and things like that all her life. But she wants to learn.
That could be the subtitle for the film, Al. The neutral ground. Let me find out for myself.
Well, that's what you did.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I really enjoyed it, man. I really fascinated. And this is your second film you directed, right?
No, my very first film.
This your very first? Because I saw
Mhm.
somewhere you had another film or something like that.
I mean,
you
I've directed a
involved in
short.
something.
I've directed a short, and I've directed. My day job is to direct stuff on the Daily Show, but this is my first feature length film.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I love the Daily Show.
Oh yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed being on the show. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, and thank you for taking time with me, and I really appreciate it. And again, viewers, please watch this film, The Neutral Ground. It's a
Yeah.
documentary. Right now, it's going to be at the New York Film Festival, right?
Yeah, we've got
Tribeca?
yeah, we're going to be at Tribeca on June 19th, Juneteenth, and we have we're getting a live premiere, which is, more than I could have hoped for. And we got a live premiere with me, Roy Wood Jr. Of The Daily Show, who's the executive producer, in convo with Nicole Hannah-Jones. That live event is sold out, but you can still get virtual tickets on the Tribeca Film Fest website. And then, if you can't make it to New York and you can't grab one of those virtual tickets, we are free on PBS everywhere starting on the evening of July 5th.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's great. You don't know. Maybe I could make it to New York,
come
and
come
then
say
maybe I
what's
can
up, cuz.
yeah, come hang out with you guys.
Yeah, come say
And,
hey.
and Roy Wood Jr. is also from my father's home state, Alabama. I spoke to him. Yeah, I spoke to him in
Wood
person
Jr. is
about
a
that.
legend in Alabama. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why it was
yeah.
important to have him on the film too, because the story is really important to him as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
All right, thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Al. I really
CJ
appreciate
Hunt.
it.
I really appreciate it. And again, this has been very great to talk to you. You're going to be a historian in the making.
Oh, thank you.
Have a great day and have a wonderful life. And tell your dad I said hello.
I will. I will.
Really? Tell him I said hello. I would love to talk to him, interview him once.
Same generation. And, I got to say, for being the same age as my dad, you're looking good, man. You're looking great.
All right. Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a great day.
Peace.
This is your entertainment ticket. Latest and greatest movie reviews and interviews. This is your entertainment ticket. YEticket.com. Yeah. This is your entertainment ticket. Latest and greatest movie